Hey guys, it's Omer from MMOs.com, and I'm doing another quick weekly news recap of all major MMO news and announcements for the week ending February 13th, 2017. This episode number 82 of the recap, and the first bit of news this week comes from Blueside regarding Kingdom Under Fire 2, which is an MMORPG that's been in development for a long time now. In an interview with the CEO conducted by 2P, it was revealed that the game is finally getting closer to release. A Chinese version should be launching relatively soon, with a Russian version coming this fall and a Western release coming shortly afterwards. A PC and PS4 version of the game will launch simultaneously in North America and Europe. And if you haven't heard of Kingdom Under Fire 2, it's an action strategy MMORPG with real-time combat that looks like it's inspired by Dynasty Warriors. The game does feature numerous persistent elements and MMORPG elements, but a really cool thing about the game that came out in the interview is that the game is actually the most expensive Korean MMORPG ever developed, as a cool $78 million has been spent on the game so far, according to their CEO. Clearly something went awry during development though, as the game's first closed beta began back in 2011, so between the first closed beta and now it's been almost 6 years or so, it's been a while, but the game is apparently coming in Russia later this year in fall, and North America shortly afterwards. But yeah, Kingdom Under Fire 2 is apparently finally happening. Up next, a fun bit of news from Riders of Icarus. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and pretty much every MMO is doing some kind of Valentine's Day event. But I thought I'd highlight Riders of Icarus because they're doing something particularly fun, where players get to submit artwork, poems, Valentine's Day cards, or pretty much anything else to their favorite GMs to woo them over, for a chance to win a date with them for an hour. Again, it's a silly little event, and if I win, I expect them to put out, alright? I expect some heavy ERP. I'll make sure to stick my toe into their ears and see how they react to that. Up next, a bit of news for Lineage Eternal from NCSoft. The game will be entering its second round of closed beta testing sometime this year, with an open beta / launch date scheduled for 2017. So the Korean version of the game will definitely launch, or at least aiming to launch, by the end of this year. Which is definitely good news for the Western release, because if the Korean version is finally out, then they'll finally start working on the Western one. Also, the North American / European version of the game will feature a PC and mobile launch simultaneously. This is the first time we're hearing about this since they first announced this years ago. So the whole mobile / PC version working together is actually going to happen. There's a lot of hype behind this one, so I am looking forward to checking it out. Hopefully the Western release isn't too far behind the Korean one, but we'll have to wait and see. Next up, also in NCSoft related release news, we have Master X Master coming back for a second round of testing in Q2 of 2017 in North America. The game is still being worked on. They're doing another beta test actually in Q1 in South Korea. But what matters to us is, of course, the American beta, which is set to begin sometime this summer. No word on whether this is a closed beta or an open beta, but I suspect it's going to be another round of closed beta testing. Next up, another bit of NCSoft news, this time WildStar related. NCSoft did report their Q4 2016 earnings this last week, and they did not mention WildStar. Normally, WildStar is broken down by revenue, similar to the way Lineage, Lineage 2, Aeon, Guild Wars 2 are all broken down by how much money they made. This time around, WildStar is no longer in the picture. They all clump it together with other games. So WildStar is not being mentioned anymore in their earnings release, which means it's taking up less and less of their attention. For those curious, last quarter, NCSoft said that WildStar made $1 million in revenue, which is relatively tiny compared to how much Lineage made, which was $118 million. Lineage 2 made $20 million. Blade and Soul made about $40 million. So the money that WildStar making is tiny, and people are now suspecting that the game will shut down. But this doesn't mean that. We just don't know what's going to happen. All we know is it's no longer taking up a slide on their investor presentation. Moving right along, another bit of NCSoft news, this time for Lineage 2. It's the last NCSoft news, I swear. And the news is that the Eden story arc in the Lineage 2 franchise will be coming to an end. The latest update, which launched last week, called Salvation, is the last story arc for the Eden story series. It's actually a 10-year-long story arc, which is longer than most of these MMORPGs survive. So it's big news for Lineage 2. And of course, because the game is still being updated in South Korea, you can expect these updates to roll over to the North American version relatively soon, probably. We actually did a video for this game last week too, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. The game is still popular in North America. A lot of people still do play it. Up next, Cloud Pirates actually began its early access beta this last week as well, and with the early access update is something called the Gold Rush update, which adds the new convoy mode to the game. Steam early access should be launching relatively soon as well. The current early access is only on the my.com website. Next up, a bit of odd news. A game called Fairy Tail Busters just went to open beta this last week in Japan. Not to be confused with the Fairy Tail anime franchise. They are entirely different and unrelated. The game is available only in Japan right now, but luckily there is no VPN required, and we actually checked it out on Sunday Funday, and we had some fun with it. So if you want to check it out, it's one of the easier foreign games to just download and play, because it just kind of works. So if you want to try a really cute third-person anime shooter, check out Fairy Tail Busters. Next up, if you don't know how to celebrate your Valentine's Day, why not check out Nine Dragons, which is launching on Steam on Valentine's Day itself, February 14th. Now yes, Nine Dragons is a really old game and it's been available for a while, but it is going that route of launching on Steam. A lot of older games decided to launch on Steam to hopefully attract a bigger audience. I'm not sure how successful it'll be in getting a bigger audience, but if you want to play Nine Dragons now, you can check it out on Steam. And speaking of old games, we have Metin 2, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary with update 17.0. Wow, 10 years since Metin 2 came out. That is absolutely nuts. We see a lot of new games shut down pretty quickly, but you have some of these old games like Metin 2, which have been around forever. Much of the update and celebration revolves around various events taking place in games, so if you play Metin 2, hop in and celebrate. Next up, a bit of industry news, this time surrounding Valve and Steam. Valve will be discontinuing the Steam Greenlight program and replacing it with something called Steam Direct. So instead of people voting for the games they want to see on Steam through Steam Greenlight, which had a ton of issues, now people have to submit their games through Steam Direct and pay a fee of between $100 and $5,000 to be determined in the future. The purpose of that fee is, of course, to weed out a lot of the crappier, more shovelware style games and focus on the people that are more serious about game development. There's no word on exactly how much it's going to cost. All we know is it'll be between $100 and $5,000. So curious to see how this is all going to work out. Up next, Mobius Final Fantasy launched on Steam this last week, and it actually had about 10 million players just recently. The game gets about 8,000 players online concurrently on Steam alone, which is pretty incredible. It's actually just a mobile game which they relaunched on PC through Steam with HD textures and 60 FPS. You can play both your mobile and PC version on the same account whenever you're home, which is a nice touch. The core gameplay is still very mobile game-esque and doesn't really require your full attention most of the time, though it does get more difficult later on. If you do like Final Fantasy though, probably give it a try. I mean, it got 10 million players worldwide, it must be doing something right. Next up we have a new action MMORPG which is launching in Korea on March 2nd called WildStar. Visually speaking, it does look a bit like a sci-fi version of Guardians of Ember. It features 5v5 squad gameplay with instance dungeons and PvP modes, as well as even player housing. Unfortunately, no word whether this one will be launching in North America or not, but of course you can always play on the Korean versions with VPNs if necessary. Next up, as for games that are actually relevant to North America, we have Lawbreakers, which is actually set to launch sometime in 2017. Nexon also reported their Q4 2016 earnings this last week, and in there they did reveal that Lawbreakers will be coming later this year. No word on exactly when, all we know is sometime in 2017. So if you're looking forward to this one, you can finally play it soon. Up next, a bit of news for Dragon Nest 2 Legend, the upcoming sequel to the original Dragon Nest game. It's a mobile title, worth mentioning right away, but the closed beta itself will be starting on February 24th and will be running until March 2nd. Gameplay-wise, it still managed to hold on to the action elements that made the original Dragon Nest game quite popular, but the aesthetic is quite different. It's got a much more darker aesthetic rather than the cartoony graphics that Dragon Nest originally had. Given that it's a mobile game, I suspect it'll actually end up launching in the West relatively after its Korean release. Typically, mobile games get localized much quicker than big PC games, but we'll have to wait and see. The next and last bit of news is a big one from Shards Online. They officially lifted their NDA for the game's core client, and a Steam launch of Shards Online should be coming in the coming months. Some other balance changes and other tweaks were also included with recent updates, so if you didn't play Shards Online in a while, maybe give it another try. We did do a Friday Grindfest video for it, so definitely check that one out if you want to know what Shards Online is all about. Anyway guys, that's it for MMO News this week. I'll see you guys all tomorrow for the podcast. Come spend Valentine's Day with the MMOs.com crew on Twitch at 4 p.m. PSD. Should be fun as always. Later guys.